Hi everybody, Paul B here. I apologize for the audio video, but it's too dark for me to record an actual video, and I wanted to document this online while I still had the opportunity because something happened today that is very significant in terms of how much time I have left to do anything at all, and I wanted to tell you about it. It's Monday, January 4th, 2016. And last night I don't even remember where I slept. Actually, I got bounced around, harassed around, policed around, and slept a few winks here and there. I don't really remember where I slept. I know I ended up in a shopping center in the morning where I was working on a video that I consider very important, so I'm putting a lot of time into it. But at noon I had to pay my car insurance, so I started dealing with that. Now, when you're homeless, one of the things that happens is that holidays lose their meaning. Not only is there no cause for celebration whatsoever and nobody to celebrate it with, but every day just looks like another. In fact, I often lose track of what day of the week it is. So anyway, I went to pay my car insurance January 1st, the day it's due, and of course that ended up being New Year's Day, which is a holiday, so they weren't there. So I slapped myself in the head, don't! And I had to wait until today. So at noon I began working on that. What I needed to do was to get the amount that I needed to pay. And the reason for this is because since I left my apartment June 1st, car insurance has been sending my bill presumably to my apartment building. And one of the things that went on the whole 8 years I was in that building was if they got mail that was for someone who was no longer there, they would just place the mail up on top of the mailboxes, which is highly illegal to my understanding. But of course, this is Minnesota. The law isn't really enforced unless it benefits the law enforcers. So I can only assume that my car insurance bills have been placed up top there and disappearing wherever they will disappear. So every month I have to call up the car insurance people, because don't forget, I'm not allowed to receive mail in the state of Minnesota. I can't get a P.O. box without a permanent address, even though you don't need a P.O. box unless you don't have a permanent address. It's hard to even explain these things. They are so absurd and ludicrous. As far as general delivery, you're only allowed to do that for 30 days. I've been out of there for almost 7 months now. So I cannot receive mail. So anyway, I have to call up every month and ask the car insurance people how much do I owe. And before I go on with this, let me tell you one other story. Last year, when I lost my job right before, literally the week before Thanksgiving, leaving me a lot to be thankful for last year, one of the first things I did was I went to my car insurance and I sat down with them and I said, I need to lower this premium because in 30 some odd years I've been driving, I have never cost you a dime. I don't get tickets. The only time I've been pulled over is when New Brighton police pulled me over for having California plates, and right before that, Texas police had done the same thing. No tickets though, because I hadn't done anything wrong. It's these other people out there who are driving like maniacs, who tailgate and change lanes with no signal, who just run head on into school buses, get on the highway in the wrong direction because they're drunk or stoned. They're the ones who are killing people and destroying property. And of course, an accident, a genuine accident could happen. I could end up causing something like that, but as a matter of my behavior, that ain't gonna happen because I am conscientious about being a good driver. So I haven't cost my car insurance anything ever. So all the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars I have paid these people has gone to pay for other people who drive like maniacs and put everyone's life and property at risk. That's one reason why, for most of my adult life, I have vigorously fought against mandatory car insurance. It is a scam. It is a form of gangsterism. I'm not going to go into any detail on that right now. How people don't recognize this in the first place leads us into a whole nother story on education and epistemology and human stupidity and things like that. Mandatory insurance. The government pointing a loaded gun at your head and saying you must purchase this commercial product or else is gangsterism. That's what gangsterism is. That's what organized crime does. It's like Guido with the baseball bat, creating both the supply and the demand. That is racketeering. So all along I've said, for decades, I have said, if they get this mandatory insurance ingrained in a generation, they're going to pile another form of insurance on people, and then another, until 90 to 100% of our income is taxed or otherwise given to the government or its pet industries, and then the government will hand us back a little bit of spare change, whatever they feel that we can live on. That was called communism in the past, but again, we have raised a generation that just has no concept of even our recent history, let alone ancient history. So I'm not going to get into that subject. My point is that I've spent my adult life fighting against mandatory car insurance. It's unjust. It's wrong. I have been paying for other people to drive like maniacs. I have been paying for other people who kill and maim and destroy property. Not me. I haven't cost my insurance people a dime. So I went to my car insurance people and I sat down with them and I said, look, since I bought this car like 6 years ago, I've been paying $66 a month. $66 a month, just giving it away. I want it lowered. And for a half hour probably, we sat there and she sat behind her computer, tap, 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 tap on the computer and grunting and making sounds like this. In the end, to cut a long story short, in the end, she was saying that she couldn't do anything. Anything she tried to change in there actually raised my insurance. Now, I have no proof of this. They're not obligated to provide me proof of this. Basically, they can do whatever they want. They can just pull numbers out of their arse, and I have no way to verify it. There's nothing I can do. The fact that I stayed there so long impressed them. However, just to get me out of there, they finally magically found something that could drop my car insurance. And what that something was to raise my collision deductible to like $100,000 or something for a car that I could probably sell for $300. Just stupidity, right? Because if I got rid of collision altogether, my insurance would have went up. It's just ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. So anyway, I got it lowered from $66 to $44. That was about a year ago. However, while I was sitting in that chair, I had to pay the $66 because, it doesn't go through the system right away. The next month, I got a bill for $44. All right. So I paid that. The month after that, I got a bill for $68, more than I had been paying every single month since I bought the car years ago. So I drove down to my car insurance place again. I sat in the same chair and I said, what is going on? Why am I paying more? And once again, for minute after minute after minute, she sat there, tap, 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 on that little computer, scratching her head, rubbing her chin, making these noises. In the end, she could not tell me why my insurance went up. Now, I'm supposedly, because the government has a gun to my head for this, I'm obligated to pay whatever these people demand. She could not tell me why my insurance went up by $22 and higher than it had been before, right after I had lowered it. And she never did give me a reason. Okay, so I had to leave there paying that amount, and I've been paying roughly that amount ever since. I have not seen the 44 ever again. It's been back up to where it was to begin with. Obviously, they're just doing whatever they feel like. There's not even an obligation for them to tell me why. So what do? I go to the great state of Minnesota and I look for the insurance board who is supposed to put a stop to this. I can't find an insurance board. I can't find anything coherent in this government. They've put everything online now, and the idea of what I'm used to, which is going to a department physically, sitting in a chair, speaking to a person, showing them documents, drawing pictures with crayons until these government people figure things out, and then compelling them to do their jobs. I haven't been able to find that in Minnesota. In just about any department, there's almost no way to actually physically go talk to these people. They've transferred everything to the internet. I challenge you, go to the Attorney General site for the state of Minnesota and try to find any way to contact them other than through their big email form. I mean, it ain't easy. You can't even reach these people. They've got such an iron curtain, I would call it, between them and us. And they do it by calling it, oh, we're offering you convenience through the internet. Well, you know what? I didn't have the internet at home. And right now when I'm homeless, I don't have much internet access. I have to pay for it and I have to fight for it. I have to go somewhere and buy coffee. I don't want to use the internet. So, what I'm getting at here is that I went through all that rigmarole a year ago on my car insurance, and I ended up just paying the $68 or close to it. It seems to bounce by a couple dollars every month. I've been paying that for a year because I haven't been in a position to go out and change insurance companies to just deal with that in any meaningful way. And unfortunately, given everything else I'm dealing with, that $20 loss every month is the least of my worries. So, here I am on January 4th at noon. I call them up, I get the amount, and I write out the check. Here's another thing, throughout all these months, I've been paying the car insurance by mailing it, and I go to the post office to get one of those pre-stamped envelopes because this is the only thing I mail every month, just this one thing. It's the only time I use mail. And I have to stand in a long, slow-moving government line at the post office, but the problem is I'm homeless. I smell like an outhouse. So in this case, the one and only time, justifiably, other people around me are looking at me with contempt. I don't blame them a bit because I smell like an outhouse. But what can I do? I have to pay this car insurance. There's a loaded gun from the government pointed at my head. I have to. That's the law. I think it's a just despicable law. It's gangsterism, but it's the law. And until I can get that law changed, I'm obeying the law. I'm taking it up the rear end along with the rest of you. So I have to stand in this line and buy this pre-stamped envelope just to mail this thing. Well, finally I said, okay, forget this. I'm going to buy a box of envelopes. So I bought a box of 100 envelopes, even though I only use 12 of them a year. So this time, today, I wrote out the check, put it in the envelope. I went to the post office, and I was going to go to the machine to buy a stamp, which would prevent me from having to stand on that line. And the problem is the line was all the way filling the whole building to the point where the windows were bulging outward, I think, which is okay. That's the other line. That's the main line. But I went over to the machine to buy a stamp, and there was a line there as well. Not as long, but still it took about 10 minutes to get through it. So I still had to stand there stinking up the place and having all these people look at me with absolute contempt. After I had made a conscious effort for a courtesy for their sake, but they don't know that, and they don't investigate anything. They don't ask questions. They don't get to know me. They just stand there and make little movements with their nose and just snide remarks and stare at me funny and step away from me and make it known that they don't like my smell. Okay? After I go through all that effort to try to make sure that they don't have to go through that. But again, what can I do? The government has a gun to my head. I have to pay this insurance. So I finally get up to the machine and I click into their, one U.S. first class postage stamp, please, and I put my debit card in there, and it comes back and says, your bank does not approve this transaction, which I have never had happen. So I don't know what that's about. So I get in my car, I drive a couple of miles to Cub Foods, where they sell stamps at the customer service desk. Again, another long line. So I wait there for about 10 minutes, again, stinking up the place, although they have much better airflow in that huge building, but still, the people standing right next to me weren't terribly happy. I finally get up to the counter, and I say, hello, could I please have one U.S. postage stamp? And she said, well, we only sell books here. And I don't know how much a book is, but I don't need it. Again, I mail one thing every month. Okay, and frankly, I can't afford much any more than one. But apparently, I can't afford one. So I had to leave there with my tail between my legs. Now, through all of this, I had burned quite a bit of gasoline because um, the place I'm in is basically a 3 mile long shopping center. There's a stoplight every block, and every single light is red. For as much as Minnesotans talk about caring about the environment, if you had an aerial view over time of this area, what you would see is cars stopping for no good reason because the traffic flow is just not done well. Let me put it that way. So the number of gallons of gasoline being burned constantly at these stoplights because there's no traffic flow. There's your environmental destruction right there. In my case, it just wastes a lot of gas, which translates to a lot of money. My next stop was the bank. I went to the bank and I went to the automatic teller to look in there and see what's going on. And to my horror, my account balance was minus $29. Minus $29. I am 48 years old. In my entire life, I have never written a bad check. I have never gone over on my accounts. I have never had a negative balance. I have always kept it where it needs to be, and it hasn't been easy. I was a college student, and I have lived through very lean times. Remember, I sacrificed my own money for all these projects my whole adult life, fighting against all kinds of atrocities that are going on in this country. Everything from mandatory insurance, which now Obamacare is the same thing. They've just piled that on because everyone bought the mandatory car insurance scam. So Obamacare is the next one, and we will have another one soon. I have fought against the dumbing down of our education system. I have fought against all these things my adult life, and I have financed it myself. So I have lived in lean times most of my adult life. But I've never had an account go over like that because I was able to maintain my finances. I was allowed to have an income. I was able to track it in a computer. I was able to watch my finances. But when you're living in a car, you can't do that. You can't do that. If I'm able to sell something small and put $10 or $20 in the bank here, and then I have to use my card there, I can't keep track of exactly what's in there. It is very, very difficult when you're dealing with this. Anyway, so I had to find out how in the world did I get over $30. That didn't make any sense. I hadn't done anything that would put it over $30. So I looked into that, and here's what I found. There were two things that took it over. Neither one had anything to do with me. The first one is the bank that I've dealt with for decades, Wells Fargo. Turns out that when you have a lot of money in your bank account, they do not charge a fee. But when you have very little money in your bank account, they suddenly charge a $5 a month fee. So now, when there were thousands in my bank account, nothing happened. They didn't charge me anything. When there's $20 in my bank account, they charge me a $5 fee. 25% of all the money I have in the bank. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Doesn't that make sense? Because somehow it's harder for them to manage my $20 than it is for them to manage my $7,000 or something. Okay? So there's $5 of that. Can you guess where the rest came from? The rest came from my car insurance people. The check that I sent them on December 1st, they did not cash it until January 2nd. They cashed my car insurance payment a month later, not just after they were supposed to receive payment for the next month, but in a different year. I sent them the check in 2015, a month before the end of the year, and they cashed it in 2016. Now, you tell me, how am I supposed to expect a responsible business to do that? I don't even know how they do the accounting that way. What would make me think that all of a sudden they would cash this when they've never done this before? What would make me think that they're suddenly going to cash this check more than a month later? So as I'm then looking at my bank account all this time, I'm seeing this, $66 or so sitting in there that I think is real money, because I assume they have cashed my check, right? I mean, when things are bouncing up and down on a daily basis, I can't tell and I am loath to log into Wells Fargo online because I have to do it from unsecured locations all the time. So I'm trying to balance this the best I can. Anyway, the point is, I'm over $30 because of a ludicrous fee that's only assessed on people who have no money to begin with, and because my car insurance was irresponsible and didn't cash my check within a reasonable amount of time. So for the first time in my life, the bank account is over. And guess what, friends? I don't really have any way to make up for that. So for what it's worth, my bank account is done. And I don't know what happens here. I'm a responsible person. I have no history of this kind of thing. I don't know what happens. Do they put out a warrant for my arrest or something for being over? I don't know how this happens. I have no idea. All I know is it ain't going to turn out well. And it's not because of anything I did. I was doing everything I can under the circumstances to make sure that everything was caught up and that there's always enough in the bank to cover any check that I write. Okay, this is other people. And as far as I'm concerned, the Wells Fargo people, between not being able to even tell me why I'm paying the amount that I am, not being able to lower my insurance when I ask them to, not being able to tell me why my insurance suddenly jacked up by a third, not even being able to tell me why that happened, and then cashing the check this late, I don't really hesitate to label these people lazy bums. Lazy bums. If that is competent business, then I was taught something totally wrong growing up. That is the most incompetent business people I can imagine. They can't tell me why they're charging me, what they're charging me. They can't cash a check on you. You know what I'm saying. I just told you the story. These people are utterly incompetent. And the fact that they don't even try to figure anything out means they're either gangsters, and that's why they don't want to tell you the truth, or they're just lazy bums. Now, this concept of lazy bums is a big deal. Look at what happened to me with the noise. My landlord wrote a lease. He wrote the lease. I didn't. He and his attorneys wrote the lease. The lease clearly says in Section 7 that the resident promises not to make unreasonable noise that harasses neighbors. There's harassment clause in there. All of these things the landlord put in there. Then he signed the lease, I signed the lease, and my neighbors signed their respective leases. Yet, my landlord refused to enforce Section 7 of that lease when my neighbors did exactly the opposite of what they promised to do in the lease. That makes my landlord a lazy bum. Now, people might look at him because he owns property and say, oh, he's a respectable businessman. He owns property. He pays his taxes. You know what? He's a lazy bum. That is what he is, a lazy bum. The man put it in his own lease, these clauses, but because it doesn't benefit him in any way to enforce it, it only hurts his tenants, he doesn't enforce it. However, he enforces the other clauses, like the part about paying your rent on time. Anything that affects him, he enforces. The man is a lazy bum. He deserves no respect, period, let alone as a responsible or a competent businessman. He's a lazy bum. My former neighbors, the ones who took it upon themselves to move into a new building and say, this place is mine now. Screw the rest of you. If you've lived here for 7 years, that's your problem. I'm here now. This place belongs to me. I do what I want. And that is endemic to Minnesota. That is a Minnesota characteristic. This narcissism, self-absorption, and what really distinguishes them from people in other states is this absolute, total lack of concern for other people. Minnesotans behave as if other people don't even exist, or if there's some kind of a subspecies. It's like you've got animals running around the place. If you had, stray cats and dogs and platypi. I mean, if you had animals walking around, you're not going to think of them in the same terms that you would as your equal human being. That's the way Minnesotans behave toward other people. So when they move into my building, they just suddenly start boom, 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 bang, boom, 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 boom. They just start making all this noise. Oh, you've lived here for many years? Tough crap. That's your problem. If you don't like it, move away. Okay, that makes my neighbors who signed a lease that promised that they would not do that, that makes my neighbors lazy bums. Lazy bums. I go, my first venture into dealing with New Brighton City, I call up the code enforcement officer to deal with this. The guy never answered his business phone. So finally I left a message, and I left my contact information. I asked him to call me back. He never called me back. You know what? That code enforcement officer is a lazy bum. He's accepting a paycheck to do his job, but he doesn't answer his phone and he doesn't return calls. He's a lazy bum. Furthermore, that guy drives around in this cute little red fire truck, and he was around me. I had to drive through town every single day to work for years, and I watched this truck always exceed the posted speed limit, and never stop at a stop sign. Just make a Hollywood stop. Okay? In other words, he's breaking the law, but he's part of the government, so he gets away with it. He never gets pulled over. He's a lazy bum. So I go to the city council. City council, for all the pain and suffering I'd been dealing with for years, they give me 2 minutes to speak, and then they send me off to their pathetic New Brighton Police Department. City council members, lazy bums. They didn't sit there and let me give my presentation in full. They didn't sit down with me and say, wow, this guy has got a problem that's destroying his life. We need to sit down and come up with an action plan to gather the evidence against his neighbors so we can enforce the law and put a stop to it and restore this guy's life. They didn't do that. They gave me 2 minutes to speak and sent me on to their lousy police department. City council are lazy bums, and yet they accept payment. They accept paychecks as city councilors. They ran for office claiming that they were going to do their jobs, which they didn't. They didn't do their job. They didn't enforce the law. These people are lazy bums. Lazy bums. I go to the police, as the city council told me to. I didn't want to because I knew the police's reputation and I had observed them for years. But that's where I got sent, so that's where I went. What did they do? Outside the city council chambers, they're really nice. They're almost petting me like a dog. Oh yeah, this is terrible. We're going to help you. If you call us, it will stop. That's what I was told. Chief of police and a police sergeant stood out there where the city councilors could see us. That's what they told me there. But less than a week later, I called the police, and what happened? If you want to know, visit my YouTube channel and listen to it yourself, because I recorded that visit. That police officer did nothing. He showed no sincere empathy for my plight. He didn't even grasp what I was trying to say. He didn't care. And he certainly did not enforce the law, even though that's his job. That's what he accepts a paycheck for, is to enforce the law. He is a lazy bum. The police chief and that sergeant who told me something that totally contradicted what this police officer actually did. Lazy bums. Every one of them is accepting a paycheck, and yet they're not doing their jobs. They are lazy bums. Bums. It's sickening. Listen to the police call when this officer came to my apartment. What did he suggest as a solution? Because he came right out and said, I'm not going to solve this problem for you right now. In fact, he's not going to solve it for me at all. He's not even trying, not even making the slightest effort. What was his proposed solution? That I move away. In other words, blame the victim, defend the perpetrators. Even if you haven't met the perpetrators, defend them anyway, because that minimizes the amount of work that this police officer needs to do. A lazy bum. A lazy bum. You know what? The whole point of the law, the reason that laws are created, like a noise law and a harassment law for people inside their homes, the reason those laws are made is so that I don't have to move away. That's the point of the law. That's the point of the law. What is the other point of the law? I mean, the point of the law, if that law didn't exist, then I would be sitting in my apartment having all this terrorizing, torturous noise injected into my apartment. People who are basically willfully making my life a living hell. If there's no law on the books, or if there's no clause in my lease to stop it, then guess what? I have no recourse. The only thing I can do is move away. But when there's a law on the books and when there's a clause in the lease, the point of that clause in the lease and the law is to provide a mechanism so that when this happens to me, authorities can enforce the lease and enforce the law, stop the perpetrator, and then I don't have to move away from my home of 7 years because of what someone who's lived there for 1 month is doing. That's the point of the law. So for me to move away, you know what it's doing? If I move away, I am endorsing lawlessness. I am endorsing anarchy. And people point the finger at me and blame me because I did not move away. I did the right thing. It's everyone else who did the wrong thing. My neighbors did the wrong thing by making the noise. My landlord did the wrong thing by not enforcing his lease and by blaming the victim and defending perpetrators who were not only breaking his lease, but also breaking the law. He was defending lawbreakers. A lazy bum. The city council and the police did the same thing. First suggestion, why don't you just move away? When's your lease up? You know what? Among so many other problems with me moving away, I would have to sign a new lease. I'm trying my best to get out of a state that I absolutely despise, to get back to normal people. I could get out of my lease where I was at with 2 months' notice. If I sign a new lease, I'm locked in for another year in a state that I despise. That's one reason I did not want to move away. Another is because any other place that I moved into would cost me more. It would probably cost me $200 to $400 a month more. Why should I take a hit like that? Why should I lose those thousands of dollars over that year when I'm stuck in a new lease because someone else broke the law? This is ludicrous. And anybody who suggests that I should move away as the solution to other people's crimes is a lazy bum. I am not going to endorse lawlessness. I don't understand why law enforcement is endorsing lawlessness by suggesting that I move away. I don't understand why the city council, why anybody in a position of authority would ever endorse lawlessness and anarchy by telling me to move away rather than enforcing the law. And you can carry this all the way up through all of the authorities in Minnesota that I went to, frankly, up to the governor's office, although I didn't push it with the governor's office, because when you're that distanced, and I mean, look at, if you know anything about the Governor Dayton, there's no point to it. There's just no point to it. That guy doesn't give a damn. His office doesn't give a damn. The farthest I got where I actually tried anything was the Attorney General's office. They didn't give a damn. Nobody gives a damn. Nobody. Over 3 years, not one Minnesota official at any level that I went to, ever, and this includes state-funded nonprofit organizations that were chartered to help people in my situations, like Homeline, to provide free legal service for people who can't afford it, on renters' issues. They never even responded to me. They never even responded when I submitted my application. All they gave me was a confirmation that said, we usually respond within 1 business day. That was a year ago. Haven't heard a word from them. You know what? They're lazy bums. And you know who runs Homeline? A bunch of attorneys. Attorneys. Lazy bums. Meanwhile, I went to private attorneys and said, look, this is about as crystal clear of lawsuit material as it gets. These people destroyed my entire life, took everything I have earned over 48 years, all because they refused to do the jobs that they accept a paycheck for. This is as clear-cut negligence as it's fully documented. There's no way you can lose this case. This is total negligence. And the effect of it was to destroy a man's life completely so that he's living in a car and dying in a Minnesota winter. And yet, every one of these attorneys I went to looked at it and instinctively just said, oh, there's nothing you can do. You can't fight City Hall. I mean, these people didn't even try. There's nothing you can do. You don't have any recourse. There's statute of limitations if you don't sue the government within a short amount of time. You know, they can go after citizens for years and years and years. There's almost no limit to when they can go after citizens. They can destroy citizens' lives from the government, but you can't go after the government once the statute of limitations is up. So I say, well, when's the statute up? Well, I'm not really sure. Okay, this is total, utter incompetence. This is an attorney. This went to law school. I could figure this out. All I have to do is go to a law library and peek inside of a book. That's all I have to do. And yet these attorneys don't even know the answers. They're lazy bums. These people are making tons of money, and how can you make tons of money when you don't even know the basic fundamentals of your own legal system? Lazy bums. These people did not have the balls, the testicles, the skill, the motivation, not even the love of the challenge to say, here's a guy who had his entire life destroyed. I am in a position as a lawyer to restore this man. I can do something that good, and I can get paid in the process. Not one of them would even entertain the idea of trying it, because they are not going to go up against their brothers, their Minnesota brothers within this same cult mentality, this good old boy system. They are not going to go up against their brothers and sisters in this cult, in the government of Minnesota. This cult of Minnesota dominates law, it dominates government, it dominates the media. It's just a big good old boy system. They ain't going to go after their friends in that system, because it might come back to haunt them later when you go up against a cult that is that vicious. That's like going up against Scientology. If you do that, you are going to have Scientologists standing at the end of your driveway holding signs telling everyone what a horrible person you are for the rest of your life, because you're dealing with nut jobs. You're dealing with psychotics, members of a cult. Now, someone with some balls, somebody with some integrity, with some kind of conscience, somebody who stands up for higher ideals, an attorney who did that would have stood up for me and said, your life was destroyed when you did nothing wrong and you did everything right. But you know what? Not one attorney would do that. They are lazy bums. And this is my point. Everyone I went to throughout all of this was a lazy bum. Everybody. Even my so-called friends, my coworkers who pretended to love me so much when I was there doing things for them, when I was making their life easier by doing an exceptional job, by bending over backwards to help them, and often doing their jobs for them. Okay, these people are moral lazy bums. They sit there and they point a finger at me. These are supposedly my friends. They point a finger at me and say, this is all your fault that you're living in a car because you didn't, quote, just move away. Really? Just move away? Look on my website on the noise trauma page, and you will find a list of just some, and this is like a dozen things, but it's just some of the consequences that affect me and me only if I, quote, just move away. I don't understand where people are saying just move away. There is a whole lot of stuff you have to do to move, and there are a whole lot of consequences for doing it. The paperwork you have to update, the fees you have to pay, the expense that you have to go through to just move away is incredible. Anyone who suggests that I should just move away because other people are breaking a law that is on the books and all they have to do is get that law enforced instead, anyone who suggests that I do that is a moral, lazy bum. They don't stand up for what is right. They don't understand the difference between good and evil. Evil doesn't even bother these people. Doesn't even bother them in the slightest. They just let it bounce right off of them. And if you wonder why our society is headed the direction it is headed, there's one of the big reasons. You don't even need to look for conspiracies. You don't need to look for a new world order. You just need to look for Joe Average on the street who no longer is offended by evil. They don't care about evil anymore. When something like this, something of this magnitude happens to their coworker, their so-called friend, and instead of standing up, taking a moral stand and doing something about it, such as going to the New Brighton City Council, standing alongside me for moral support so that the city council sees it isn't just one person who's coming to them, it's a bunch of people, and they better take action because there's a lot of eyes watching them. That could have helped. People could have called up the police department and said, what the hell are you doing? You didn't enforce your own law. You told this guy to move away. You told this guy to endorse lawlessness, and yet you're the police department. My coworkers could have done that. My friends could have done that, but they didn't, not one of them. They could have called up legislators and said, what the hell's going on here? This system's corrupt to the core. We want you to enforce the law and get these noisy people out of there so this guy gets his life back. Nobody did it. Nobody. Every one of them is a lazy bum. And as long as we're talking about my workplace, When I was there, I was probably the lowest paid person there, except maybe the janitor, but I don't know what the janitor made, so that may not even be true. All I know is that the salary I received, people doing the same job as me at other companies were getting paid at least 30% more. They were getting paid tons more. You can ask why I didn't switch companies. It goes right back to what I was talking about before, okay? This was enough. I had a 10-year plan. I was 8.5 years into it when my life got destroyed. If people had just left me alone, I would have been fine, and I would have been out of there and out of Minnesota a year and a half later. But no, nobody would, everyone around me was a lazy bum. So I took the exploitation at work. I dealt with it because I only had to deal with it another year and a half, and I'd be leaving these fools behind for the rest of my life. Never to even remember that they exist. I just wanted to forget all about Minnesota. But they screwed everything up. They took everything from me a year and a half before I was ready. Okay, and frankly, it probably would have taken a little more than a year and a half at this point because I had lost so much because of all the issues I had to deal with the noise and such. At work, so I'm this low paid, I'm this exploited. My work ethic is the type that makes me get the job done whatever it takes. If that means I have to stay late, which I most certainly did. I was there later than most of the other 600 people in this building most nights. 600 people. And yet my car is the last one in the parking lot. It sure wasn't the president's car that was there late. It was my car, the underpaid and exploited guy. Working weekends if I have to. Working holidays if I have to. At least one vacation. I came in for at least one day, if not two. Okay? And this is all on my conscience. I'm not saying the company told me to do it. This is what I had to do my job adequately. Why? Because I was doing other people's jobs as well. Specifically, the jobs of people who were paid maybe 2-3 times as much money as I make. But they didn't do their jobs in time, and they dumped stuff on me, say, the night before a holiday. So it's my choice. I can either leave it and enjoy my holiday and then return and get blamed because it's sitting on my desk at the deadline, or I can stay there over the holiday and get it done, turn it in, and then watch these people, these lazy bums who earn 2 or 3 times as much more than me, who dumped it on my desk at the last minute. I can watch them get praise and awards because they, quote, got it done on time. Even though they didn't, it was me who did it. I never got any praise. I never got any acknowledgement. Half the time I didn't even get a thank you from these people. So I would come in holidays, weekends, whatever, staying late all the time to get these things done to help these people look good while they're out chilling at their cabin. Lazy bums. Lazy bums. The management at this place. I would responsibly, it's an analog to what goes on in society. All of these people I'm talking about, top to bottom, they drink beer, they watch television, they take their kids to soccer practice or hockey practice. The one thing they don't do is be good citizens. They don't learn the reality of the world around them. They don't take action within the system as they should. They don't vote responsibly. These people don't even know who they're voting for. All right? So these people are just lazy bums in their social and political lives as much as in their professional lives. But the management at this company, I would tell them what's on the mind of all the people who are just sitting there timid and terrified of losing their jobs if they bring it up, but they knew it was tearing the company apart. They knew it was affecting our revenues. They knew it was affecting our competitiveness. So I took a stand and I stood up and I brought these things to management. What did management say? Don't rock the boat. Go along to get along. Just all these stupid ass cliches. The kinds of cliches that stupid people will give you. They didn't give you what you. I've got a police officer circling me right now, if you can believe that, again, so I'm a little bit flustered. I'm sorry for choking on this statement. These management people, I'm trying to tell them how to improve the company. Okay, I'm at least trying to let them know what other people are thinking. Finally, the police officer left. This is what I have to deal with, folks. When's the last time you tried to write something down or record it, and you've got a police officer circling you slowly like a shark? This is what I have to deal with. And people wonder why I'm so angry out here. Beautiful. I would go to that management with things that really mattered. And don't forget, I was a former revenue manager. I had revenue on my mind all the time. The company itself, at the sky high, at the very top, at the stockholder level, they're really worried about revenues. You would think people might listen to me, but nope, they didn't want to hear it. Hand over their eyes, hand over their ears, hand over their mouth. And they got PO'd at me for even bringing it up. Because you know what? Frankly, what I was bringing up was the fact that management was a bunch of lazy bums. If they weren't lazy bums, we wouldn't have the revenue problems. We wouldn't have all the problems they had in that company. Lazy bums. So I end up losing my job. There's a reason for that. It ain't because of my performance, I'll tell you that. My performance was as top-notch as it comes. All right? So, my point through all of this, everyone I've mentioned here in the state of Minnesota, this is what, if you read my website, the original website before it turned into kind of a blog on the homepage, started out with the intro page on my story. If you look at www.Minnesota.com and you go click on my story and you read the first two sections, or introduction and backstory. And there's a lot of writing there, I know, but it gives a very clear account of what happened to me in terms of the noise and everything else. The first thing I say when I kick into gear on the intro page is that what I experienced is so absurd and ludicrous and unjust and surreal and Kafkaesque that it makes, Alice in Wonderland look like Leave It to Beaver normality. It's ludicrous. And what I was getting at with that was the fact that every single person, without exception, over 3 years of being tortured inside my own home by this noise, every person from the very bottom to the very top within the state of Minnesota refused to do their jobs, refused to take a moral stance that made any rational sense whatsoever. They uniformly blamed the victim, defended the perpetrators, because that was the path of least resistance as far as they were concerned. It put the least onus on them to actually do anything. Not just their job that they're paid to do, but even to just exhibit proper morality. The kind of morality that allows a civilization to operate in harmony. They wouldn't even do that. That's what makes my story so surreal, so Kafkaesque. If there had been one person in 3 years who actually did their job, who was not a lazy bum, one person in 3 years, even then I probably wouldn't have the right to create a website that claims that this is totally absurd, totally unjust, totally ludicrous, totally surreal and Kafkaesque. But I didn't get one person in 3 years. Every one of these people, even my so-called friends, points a finger at me for doing the right thing, for standing up for law and order, by refusing to move away from criminals and instead demanding that people who get paid to enforce the law, that they actually enforce the law, that they do their jobs that they're paid to do, that they act like responsible adults. They act like decent human beings. Yet people point their finger at me and say, the reason you're living in a car today is because you didn't move away. I am so sick of that response. If nothing else, when you're dealing with a state where the people are that narcissistic and self-absorbed and, like I said before, uniformly, they don't give a damn about other people. To think I'm going to move after all that expense and time and life disruption, locking myself into a lease that will take me beyond where I want to be, stuck in a state that I despise. And then the idea that I'm going to get into a quieter place where, of course, I'll be paying, hundreds of dollars more each month than I was before. The idea that these people are going to be quiet, that these people are going to be respectful any more than they were in the place I was before, it doesn't make any sense. The only way that would happen is if, against all logic, against any sensibility at all, I was just unlucky enough to have moved into the one building where every loud and violent and obscene, obnoxious neighbor moved into. Does that make any rational sense to people? Am I some kind of a magnet Does the fact that I go to work and work really, really hard and do my job instead of being a lazy bum, and then come home and without a television or anything, continue to work on things that I believe are important, that I want to contribute to this world, is there something in there that turns me into a magnet that forces other people against their will who are loud and obnoxious to move into my building? Or is it more likely that this is a random sampling of Minnesotans and that I could very well expect to have the same thing anywhere else I go? You know what? I didn't want to pay thousands of dollars and totally disrupt my life and move myself even further away from where I worked, just to find out. I lived pretty close to where I worked. That was one of the greatest benefits of it. Okay, if it wasn't icy cold, I could actually walk to work if I had to. I didn't want to lose that on top of everything else. This is just ludicrous. Everyone involved in this from top to bottom is a lazy bum. As far as I'm concerned, this cop who is now circling me yet again is a lazy bum. Okay, I don't understand, because there's people out there, I'm watching straight ahead, I'm watching cars zooming by at least 20% more than the speed limit. But he's circling me. I'm just sitting here talking, granted, talking rather loud. Okay, he's gone now. But why is he looking at me? He's not looking at these people out on the road who are endangering people's lives. I'm seeing people tailgate right in front of my eyes, right in front of his eyes, if he'd move his eyes from me to them. Okay, the state is full of lazy bums. Lazy bums. And yet I'm the one who's living in a car. I'm the one who's lost everything I've worked my entire life for. I'm the one who no longer has any reason to be alive. All because of a bunch of lazy bums. If any of these people had done anything that remotely resembles human decency over these years, I could have gotten enough minimal support to help me. Because without that support, I'm completely alone out here. You know, if I had had family here, if I had had a bunch of friends who were not Minnesotans here, if I had had some core of support, maybe things would have been different. But I didn't have that. I had to depend upon Minnesotans entirely. And that's the problem. You can't depend on these people. You can't depend on these people. They kick you when you're down. I'm sitting here dying in a Minnesota winter, and they're more concerned with proving the point that I'm to blame for this because I did not endorse lawlessness and endorse anarchy by moving away from criminals. I've had it, folks. As you can tell, I'm very angry, but I wanted to make this point of lazy bums because I've never really made it before, and it needs to be said. It needs to be said. Every one of these people, from the city, the police, my landlord, the management where I worked, and many of my coworkers, are just lazy bums. And it sickens me. It sickens me to see people who are that lazy to begin with, accepting a paycheck. You want to talk about morality. You want to talk about good and evil and right and wrong. That is wrong. To accept a paycheck and then be a lazy bum like that. But on the flip side of that, you've got me, who was not a lazy bum. I wasn't drinking beer and watching television and taking my kids to soccer practice rather than teaching them how to be good citizens. When I got out of work, the last guy out of a building of 600 people most of the time, after I did all that work with no extra pay, because I was on salary, no extra pay for all that extra work, doing other people's jobs for them much of the time, I came home and what did I do? I was running projects that were meant to benefit society. I was researching reality. I was writing about it. I was trying to podcast about it, trying to educate people about the reality of this world because we've got some serious problems in this world. And I've done that my entire adult life. I have sacrificed everything, including having a family of my own, in order to do this for the benefit of other people. That's what got interrupted and destroyed by these noisy neighbors and by these authorities who refuse to do their jobs. And yet, these people, even my so-called friends, can sit there and accuse me of being the reason for all this pain and woe. They don't have the foggiest idea what I do, what I have been through. They never bothered to come over and witness the noise. I asked them to. They never bothered to come over, and I needed a witness. They never bothered to come over, but yet they have all the answers. They know everything. They know why I didn't move. It's because I'm just a stubborn, These people are operating from a position of ignorance. And you know what? That's analogous to the way they operate throughout their entire lives. If I try to tell them what's going on with, the monetary system, the Federal Reserve, if I try to tell them anything that's going on out there, these people who've never researched a thing in their freaking lives think they have all the answers because they saw it on television. And they sit there and they don't like what they're hearing from me, so they just discount it and they tell me to shut up. I don't want to hear this. There's nothing you can do about it. Irresponsible, lazy bums. This is my point. Among so many other problems with Minnesota, you've got the same thing you have in any other cult. You have a leadership that exerts power and dominance over others, that deliberately dumbs down the people below them and tries to keep them under their control. And one of the ways you do that is through media and such, and through all these programs in the workplace that just dumb people down, terrify them, make them terrified of losing their jobs. You think I wasn't terrified of losing my job? Sure I was, because if that happened, I might end up where I am here. But you know what? I did the right thing. I was not a lazy bum. The fact that I'm in this situation doesn't mean I did anything wrong. It's just like in the book of Job. The book of Job, his friends come and talk to him, and supposedly to comfort him, but instead they just ream him a new asshole. They say, well, you must have done something wrong or God wouldn't have done all this stuff to you. And he's saying, I didn't do anything wrong. Well, you must have. You must have, because good people don't suffer like this. And Job kept saying, I didn't do anything wrong. And then when God finally came down, he did exonerate him, and he told these friends, you don't know what you're talking about. You're completely ignorant. You're so full of pride, so full of arrogance, that you would condemn a good man. You would condemn my faithful servant who stood up for what is good and right and who eschewed evil. You would take action against him and condemn him when you don't even know what the story was. You just thought you knew. And he told Job's friends to give him gifts to help restore him back to prosperity, or you will incur the wrath of God. That's how angry God was with Job's friends for blaming the victim. The most pain I have suffered at all through all of this is having these so-called friends actually have the audacity to claim that this is my fault when they don't even know what the story is. They never went to the city council with me. They never came to witness the noise for themselves. They're acting from a position of ignorance. That is what has hurt me more than anything else. People who claim to care about me instead condemning me, just like Job's friends condemned him. If they were standing up for me, it's really simple. You mobilize. You pass a hat around, take up a collection so that no one person takes a big hit. You hand me the hat, and I've got enough money to go get reestablished. I will still have lost everything I worked my entire life for, but at least I could reestablish myself without carrying around this burden of knowing that I took all that compensation from one nice person, which hurts them. I don't want to do that. This concept of mobilization escapes Minnesotans. You know why? Because mobilization requires effort. It requires activity. And the people who will not do that are lazy bums. You see, if a child goes missing, most communities mobilize. They mobilize. They start putting out signs and pictures all over. They start asking questions. They start searching the woods. They get together and come up with a reward for information. Okay, and they don't stop. Look up Maddie Scott, MADDYSCOTT. Look that up on YouTube. She disappeared in Canada I think 10 years ago. People who don't even know her are still looking for her. They mobilized immediately. They came up with a $100,000 reward. Now, after 10 years, it's pretty certain that Maddie did not survive. And yet they're still mobilized trying to find her. Those are people who actually care. Okay, they didn't just open their mouths. They didn't just flap their lips. They did something. They mobilized. They took effort. They made personal sacrifices. They donated money. They did what it took to the best of their ability to get Maddie back. Unfortunately, in that case, whatever happened to her, they haven't been able to figure it out yet. Man, I sure hope they will, because that family deserves closure if anyone does. If you have a law that's passed, a stupid law A corrupt law, something that just puts money in the pockets of legislators, which nowadays is most laws. But if the people are aware enough to know that that's what's happening and they want to repeal the law, what do? You mobilize. You mobilize people to take action to put pressure on the legislators to repeal the stupid or the corrupt law. Mobilization is how you get things done. But the people who will not mobilize are lazy bums. Like I said on another video, and this is no lie because frankly I've done it before. If someone I cared about was had their life threatened by something, I would give up everything I had if that's what it took to help them. And I wouldn't miss it, and I wouldn't say a word to these people. There is no way I would dump shame or guilt upon these people. It's like, this is my privilege to help you. How could I ask for a greater privilege in this life than that at this point in my life I have these resources that I can give up to save your life, someone I care about. What a privilege. What a privilege. But they don't see it that way. They see it as, well, we're going to offer help. If he doesn't want it with all these strings attached, if he doesn't want it with us sticking a knife through his dignity, blaming him for his pain and woe when he's the only one who did nothing wrong, well, that's his own fault then. Now I can sleep tight in bed. That's Minnesota. And that is exactly what would not have happened in any other state. In any other state, good and decent people, and especially my friends, people who care about me, would have mobilized. They would have fixed this problem so long ago that even I wouldn't remember what happened. But instead, I'm sitting here dying in a car in a Minnesota winter, and according to the weather service, it's going to be -5 degrees in a couple days with a wind chill of -20 to -30 degrees. In the interest of this not just repeating the same thing over and over as if I haven't already, I'm going to end this video now. Thank you for listening.